Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my top 10 10th Doctor's story ranking. Okay, so these are my top 10 10th Doctor stories, basically. No introduction needed, apart from the fact that I loved the 10th Doctor. He was technically the one that got me into the show. I did, like I said at the end of my, start of my review of The End of Time, I technically did see Rose, The End of the World, and The Christmas Invasion when they aired. So technically, Christopher Eccleston was my first Doctor. But when I actually watched The Idiot's Lantern, that's what got me into the show. So technically, David Tennant was my Doctor, at least my Doctor for part of my childhood before it went to Matt Smith. I suppose if you count being under 18 as still being counted as childhood, Peter Capaldi as well, technically. And then he was technically also the first Doctor as an adult, whilst I was an adult. So, David Tennant was the one that was the Doctor in the episode that got me into the show, and he was the Doctor for part of my growing up with the show. And this is starting from Idiot's Lantern onwards. This is where things get a bit tougher for reviews, as as I've been watching since then, since that story. Nevertheless, I've still stuck to my to my honest opinions from what I think of the stories now. And this goes for every story, past, present, and future. So, yeah, so hopefully my judgment has been clouded. Then again, I was a bit nice on Fear Her, and I didn't know what to do with the Doctor's Daughter. But at the same time, there's a few stories on this list that I wasn't so keen on before, but now absolutely love. So, let's not waste any more time and jump straight into it, my top 10 10th Doctor stories. Before we start, an honourable and dishonourable mention. Dishonourable mention first, always get the negative out of the way first. I think this is everyone's dishonourable 10th Doctor story, if it isn't Love and Monsters. Which I think is a little unfair on that story. I can totally get why some people don't like it, but to call it one of the worst stories of all time, I disagree. I think there's quite a few good stuff there. It's only really with the third act where it kind of goes downhill. It's not the typical Doctor Who story, but that doesn't mean it's automatically awful. And the same goes for this story. Although technically this one isn't that great, isn't actually that great. I did give it a kind of a fair score in my review, but that's because I liked it, I enjoyed it. But compared to all the other stories, not just the David Tennant era, but spoiler alert for the next video, the entirety of the Russell T Davies era, I thought this one was the weakest story-wise. And that story is Fear Her from season 28, aka series 2. Yeah, although I don't hate Fear Her like most fans do, I thought it was likable, but not remarkable. I think with its premise, it was simple. It was all right. It could have done a little bit more, but it didn't have to. It was all right. It wasn't amazing, but it was okay. I know not everybody's going to agree with that. I know this one is considered one of the worst stories of the show, or at least of the RTD era. In the 2014 Doctor Who magazine poll of the stories up to the time of the Doctor, where you could rank them, it came second to last, so number 240, after the just above the Twin Dilemma, naturally. But then it came second to last, 240th overall. So, yeah, I didn't think this one's that bad. I think it's meh, but it's I can understand why some people don't like. Quite a lot of people actually don't like it. Personally, I thought it was okay. Everything else, quite a lot better, really. Moving on to my honourable mention. Now, the 10th Doctor, for me, had about, what was it, 14 10 out of 10s stories? About 14 10 out of 10 stories. So I could only put the top 10 in this list, but there were about 4 more I would give a 10 out of 10. And this one would be what would be number 11. This one is, and therefore be my honourable mention. The 10th Doctor has had the most 10 out of 10 stories out of any Doctor so far, although I don't expect the 11th, 12th, or 13th Doctors to beat them yet. But out of the Doctors so far, the 10th Doctor has had the most, with about 14, in my opinion. The closest competition is the 4th Doctor, having 9 10 out of 10 stories across his 7 series, although 7 of those 9 are in his first 3 seasons. But this honourable mention that I want to provide for the 10th Doctor is Planet of the Ood, from season 30, aka series 4. Yeah, I thought Planet of the Ood was a brilliant story, a great sort of anti-slavery story, having to save the Ood. And like the Sontaran Stratagem, the Poison Sky that followed, although that didn't get a 10 out of 10, it gave the Ood a bit more of a backstory, and expanded their role from their previous appearance. And it was just a really great story, and really enjoyable and very fun. Bit violent as well, though, and quite gruesome in places. Don't let the younger children see this. I mean, the usual family audience, it's fine, but to the really younger children, maybe let them wait a few more years before they check this one out. Um, Moving into the top 10 list, here we go. Top 10 territory. Starting with number 10. Now, a lot of people would want me to put this first or second, or at least top 5. But for me, this one comes a nice solid number 10. I know my friends from the Universals, Matt Moyer, Thomas Hayden James, and Jean-Luc Harry will all be happy to see this on the list. Number 10 is the second most popular 10th Doctor story, Midnight, from season 30, aka series 4. Yeah, this one, along with Blink and Human Nature and the Family of Blood, are the most popular 10th Doctor stories. Also, Doomsday and Army of Ghosts Doomsday and The Girl in the Fireplace. Probably also the Series 4 finale as well. But yeah, I think Midnight is a really great story. I can totally see why lots of people love this one. I do have a few minor personal issues, but I can't really say they ruin the story, because they're actually quite necessary to the story, and the story itself is really good and a very interesting story direction to take, and a Doctor Who adventure, and another unique Doctor Who story. Things are a little bit different this time, and I think that's what got a lot of people on board, because it was quite different, and different that they liked, and tried to do something a little bit unique. Moving on to number 9. Number 9 is an episode I just bloody loved. I thought it was an epic adventure, an outstanding piece of writing, and just some great television. Coming quite early into the 10th Doctor's era, but not too early. I mean, the Christmas Invasion did get out a 10 out of 10 story from me, but that one didn't quite make it onto the list. I hope I'll try and remember which ones also didn't quite make it to the list at the end. But Christmas Invasion missed out. This one, on the other hand, also came pretty early into the 10th Doctor's run, and was an outstanding adventure. Tooth and Claw, from season 28, aka series 2. I just really enjoyed Tooth and Claw. I thought it was a great story, a great adventure, and just an epic ride and event. An epic ride. It really should have been the first episode, because it sets up the Torchwood story arc really well. Plus the fact that it's just it's a much better story than New Earth. It would have been a much better way to start the series than that one. That one would have been better as a second episode, and just be a fun comedic filler, basically. But this one is a much more important story going forward. The CGI on the werewolf actually looks really well in 2020 standards. It looks really good. And Pauline Collins does a great standout performance as Queen Victoria. I just found the ideas and concepts within the story just really well, and worked really greatly, and ties into the overall story arc of Series 2 really well. Moving on to number 8. Number 8 is another magnificent story early on in a series of the 10th Doctor. And I thought this one was just a great story and a great time. And apparently it's Russell T Davies's favourite story that he wrote, according to my friend and subscriber Jack the Film Fanatic, aka Jack McCulloch. Shout out. So this story is Gridlock, from season 29, aka series 3. What a great story to wrap up the New Earth trilogy. The stories that story are trilogy of stories that started with the end of the world in series one and followed up with New Earth in series two. And this one just wraps it up as well as the Face of Bow story really well. And it also sees the return of the Macra from 1967's The Macra Terror. And in my opinion, it's a much better story than that one. No offense to anyone who prefers The Macra Terror. Um, the Macra are great here, although they don't have an awful lot to do. They did have a bit more of a plan in the Macra Terror. But then again, if they're evolved into beasts, then it makes sense. More interesting is the human character interactions, humanoid character interactions between the Doctor, Martha, and other people on the motorway, including Ardal O'Halloran as Brannigan. He's outstanding. He's one of my favourite guest cast members in a Doctor Who series story. Who doesn't play who isn't a major character later on down the line or in the show. Just a fantastic guest character for that one episode and a fantastic actor to play him. And also, I like Martha's not really kidnappers characters. They're really fun as well. And the Chesini sisters are pretty fun. And the bit where the 10th Doctor has to climb down from car to car in order to get to the bottom lane is a great sequence. And the addition of the Macra just throw in an additional level of amazingness into the story alongside the truth and revelations at the end. Not to mention a great speech from David Tennant when he's describing to Martha about everything about Gallifrey, helping us set in motion the events for the series finale with the Face of Bow's message, as well as also letting her know about the Daleks before they encountered them in the next story, which will also not be on this list. So, Gridlock, an amazing story in a pretty much amazing series, actually. Moving on to number 7. Number 7, I think this one is my second favourite, actually. I was going to say my favourite of this particular series, but second favourite, actually. This one's my second favourite of the 10th Doctor's first series, Series 2, and it's just a really great story. From season 28, aka series 2, The Impossible Planet and The Satan Pit is my number 7 choice. I thought this one was a pretty intense and pretty well done story. A great, based on the Siege story, reminiscent of the Patrick Troughton era, with a bit of a scary monster horror type vibe to it, and some ancient sci-fi mystery. Another group of great supporting characters from Sanctuary Base 6, and the introduction of the Ood. Whilst their backstory gets a bit more expanded on and explained in Planet of the Oods, they still make a great first impression in this two-parter, and it's just a really fun and engaging and entertaining story, and a really great thrill ride of an adventure. It's also the best. It's got the best uses of Murray Gold's scary build-up music that we get throughout this story. He uses it again throughout 42 and a couple of Series 4 episodes, but it's this story where it feels the best as it's building up towards the beast. And that is a great CGI beast as well, and really greatly done. And the 10th Doctor standoff against it, and the fact, because in part 1, the Impossible Planet, the TARDIS went down into the planet and they were kind of trapped. It was a fantastic reveal when the 10th Doctor found the TARDIS towards the end of the second part. Fantastic moment. Okay, moving on to number 6, another great two-part story coming just after the halfway mark of the series, this time from Series 3, aka Season 29, and also considered one of the most popular stories of the era. And this time, the Doctor isn't actually in this story quite a lot, but it's not really a Doctor-like story like this story's follow-up, but more of the fact that the Doctor has turned himself human, so he's not around. You have to make deal with this guy called John Smith until he decides to open the watch and becomes the Doctor again. This is, of course, the ever-popular and the ever-beloved Human Nature and the Family of Blood. Another thrilling story, another great emotional ride with some fantastic character beats in this story, and the first of the 3 stories that I considered David Tennant's best performance of the show before he one-upped himself a series later, and then one-upped himself another year later from that, or year and a half, I should say. And yeah, the Human Nature and the Family of Blood is absolutely amazing. Human Nature is a great setup, and the Family of Blood is a fantastic payoff. John Smith's a great and likable character, and Tennant does an amazing job with him. This is probably the story where we feel the most for Martha, where we care the most. By 9 episodes in, we're starting to love and care for Martha throughout the series, and this is the one where we're hooked onto her. Nurse Redfern's a great character, Tim Latimer's a great character, and the villains are brilliant. Ooh, they're pretty creepy. The Family of Blood, with the nice addition of the Scarecrows for this story, based on a novel by Paul Cornell featuring the Seventh Doctor and Bernie Summerfield, minus the Scarecrows. They were a good addition for this TV adaptation. And just a brilliant story throughout. I can see why lots of people consider this a masterpiece. Moving on to number 5, another story widely considered a masterpiece, and another story where the Doctor's not really involved this time. A bit of a kind of a Doctor Light episode this time, but for good reason. For this story, C has a look at a universe where the Doctor, what if the Doctor had died during the events of a particular story? In this case, the Runaway Bride. Number 5 from season 30 or series 4 is Turn Left. Yeah, Turn Left is a brilliant, brilliant story, an absolute masterpiece in storytelling. Great look at the psyche of Donna Noble and her character progression. Rose Tyler is actually really great in this story, to the surprise of people who aren't actually fans of her. I love Wilf. I love Bernard Cribbins. He's great, as is Jacqueline King as Sylvia Noble. And it's just some really great stuff. Look at what a world without the Doctor could look like, as other friends and allies of the Doctor die when trying to sort out some situations he would sort out, and a dystopian future happens as well. Pretty nasty. So, yeah, this one is a really, really great adventure, and just a pretty nasty experience, but still a necessary one for the character of Donna, as well as to show what the universe could be like without the Doctor, using a couple of events from the past couple of series. Moving on to number 4, this one's another really emotional story, another early on 10th Doctor story, and just a absolute amazing adventure. Mix of both science fiction and historical drama, and just magnificent. My favourite story from Series 2, or Season 28, this is a great emotional rollercoaster ride, as the 10th Doctor becomes the imaginary friend of Madame de Pompadour. I probably pronounced that wrong. Nick from the future here, I forgot to say what the story actually was. My favourite story from Series 2, aka Season 28, it's The Girl in the Fireplace. But yeah, this is a great story filled with love and loss, and just a pretty brilliant story as we go through the life of Madame de Pompadour and the Doctor and his companions interacting with her, as well as a great climax where these robots, these clockwork robots, try to come for her head so that they can use it to fix their spaceship. And the Doctor comes in riding Arthur, smashing through a mirror to burst into the ballroom. That's got to be one of Doctor Who's most iconic scenes, and the final scene where the Doctor is informed of her death and reads her letter are pretty heartbreaking. Never mind Doomsday's ending. This is a heartbreaking ending. Oh boy. Speaking of heartbreaking endings, number 3, the one and only special of the 2008 to 10 specials to make it onto this list. Which is absolutely fine, because there was only 5 of them, or 4 if you count stories, so it's just as well we got one. Another story about loss, and not so much love, but definitely loss and sorrow, as the Doctor faces a similar situation and dilemma to that he faced in the Fires of Pompeii, which will also not be on this list, when he encounters the crew of Bowie Base 1 and has to decide whether to join in with the events going on or leave them to their fate. And in the end decides not only is he going to come in and help them, but he's going to save them and be Time Lord victorious, only to be brought straight back down to Earth by the fact that he hasn't really changed that much, and that he's actually gone too far. Number 3 is, of course, the Series 4, Season 30, 2009 Autumn Special, The Waters of Mars. The third of the 2008 to 10 specials that followed Series 4 and kind of bridged the gap between Series 4 and 5, and led directly into the 10th Doctor's regeneration. This story preceded the end of, the direct predecessor to the end of time, if you discount Dreamland, which neither of those two will either be on this list, by the way, so those who dislike either of those two stories rejoice. But The Waters of Mars, another highly popular story in this ranking, as will be the top 2. So I'm being a bit typical, to be honest. As is was Girl in the Fireplace, to be honest. Quite a few of these are quite popular stories in the 10th Doctor's era. But yeah, The Waters of Mars is just a thrilling, epic story. Another great dilemma, like in The Fires of Pompeii, whether to jump in and save them. Another great monster in the form of the Flood. It's great that like the Midnight Entity, we don't actually see what they were trying to raise from the ice field, what the original creature was. And it's focused on the on the human characters, specifically Captain Adelaide Brooke, the guest companion of the story, played fantastically by Lindsay Duncan, with a great Dalek cameo and some great references to the Ice Warriors and Ood Sigma making another cameo at the end. What more could you ask for in an epic Doctor Who adventure? One that pushes the 10th Doctor's non-interference code to the limit before snapping and becoming the Time Lord Victorious. We may see an expansion of that in the upcoming Time Lord Victorious multi-platform adventure later this year, but for the TV stories, this was the epic moment where the Doctor thought he could beat Time, being the last of the Time Lords, but Time had other ideas, and soon Time would be out to get him as he faced his final battle in the next 2 specials and the final 10th Doctor adventure. So, in order to celebrate the 10th Doctor, let's talk about his top 2 stories. Okay, moving on to number 2, my favourite of the Series 4 scripts. Series 4 had some amazing episodes. This story series had the most 10 out of 10 stories in any Doctor Who season. 3 of them sadly didn't quite make the top 10 list, and that was Planet of the Ood, The Stolen Earth, Journey's End, and Voyage of the Damned. They would be 11th, 13th and 14th respectively, with the Christmas Invasion from Series 2 being 12th. But the other 3 Series 4 stories made it onto this list, alongside the other 10 out of 10 stories from Series 2 and 3 and The Waters of Mars. Told you the 10th Doctor had lots of 10 out of 10 stories. They can all get onto this list, even all the ones from my favourite season. Which is season 30, series 4. But this story is just an absolute masterpiece in terms of, like Girl in the Fireplace, it's funny enough it's written by the same writer. It's great emotion, great adventure, and also a bit of a great setup for something that's going to for a story arc that's going to play out throughout series 5 and 6, which to say what you like about it later down the line, but it starts off pretty brilliantly, and just another brilliant story. From season 30 or series 4, Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead is my second place story. Yeah, I thought this one was another great emotional roller coaster with the Doctor River Song story arc, as well as with storyline, as well as the, Donna being in the computer storyline in the second episode. Great supporting characters, great rollercoaster ride, another great and scary villain in the form of the Vashta Nerada, and just some great imaginative moments in the great setting in the form of the library. Really, there isn't really anything wrong with this story. In fact, this one's more or less pretty perfect, apart from, yeah, they do go maybe a tiny little bit overboard in the whole he hasn't met me yet spoiler stuff, although perhaps not as bad in series 5 or 6. Maybe question marks, we'll see when we get to them. But apart from maybe a few too many times mentioning them without giving a bit more meat to the actual thing, because it's still set up for what's coming later. But never mind, the story's still magnificent. But what could possibly top Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead? How about the most popular story of the entirety of the new series, and one of the most popular stories of all time? This story, as I meant, talking about Fear Her coming second to bottom of the 2014 Doctor Who magazine poll. That same poll, this story came second, and also came second on the poll previously in 2009 for the 200 stories following Planet of the Dead, a 10th Doctor 2009 special, which is not on this list, obviously. Because otherwise, the only place it would go is number one. It's not number one. Number one is, in fact, the most popular 10th Doctor story, the most popular new series story, and one of the most popular stories of all time. From season 29, aka Series 3, and it's my favourite story from that one, Blink. Yeah, there's a reason this one's considered one of the greatest stories of all time. It's fucking awesome. For starters, Carey Mulligan is a fantastic guest star as lead Sally Sparrow. Yeah, the Doctor's not really in this one, but he does have a bit more of a presence than Love and Monsters or Turn Left. Well, apart from the maybe the final scenes of Turn Left, but still. He still has a bit more interaction. I would have liked a bit more Martha though, but never mind. Larry's also a pretty fun character. I mean, yeah, he's not perfect, but he's quite funny. The Weeping Angels are a fantastically scary monster, and this is the best they've done. And the direction by Hattie MacDonald is perfect, and with a great script by Stephen Moffat. Also, like Human Nature, Family Blood, which came directly before this. This was based on a previous story by Moffat, a short story for Doctor Who Annual 2006 called What I Did in My Holidays by Sally Sparrow, but expanded, made a bit more scary, and including the Weeping Angels, and throwing quite a bit more sci-fi mystery into the story, and just working on so many levels, and just being an absolute amazing story. This one is genuinely perfect Doctor Who, and you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way, apart from having a little bit more Martha, but that's about it. So that's it from my ranking of my top 10 10th Doctor stories. This is a personal list, so if you disagree with any of this, that's absolutely fine. Your list could be completely different to mine. I know not everybody's going to put Blink up, despite number one or number two or top 5, despite it being one of the most popular stories of all time. I know not everyone's going to put Gridlock or Tooth and Claw on this list, but personally, my top 10 options, as well as what would have been numbers 11 to 14, which are the other 4 10 out of 10 stories, are amazing Doctor Who stories. And I also really loved quite a few other stories that didn't quite make 10 out of 10 status throughout series 2, 3, and 4, but were still absolutely amazing in their own right, like the Sontaran 2-parter, Smith and Jones, that was amazing. The series 2 and 3 finale, series 4's finales got a 10 out of 10, but the other 2 got 9s. They were great. School Reunion is a great return for Sarah Jane Smith, and a great reintroduction to the Cybermen with their first 2-parter in Series 2. Just some really great stories throughout Series 1, 2, and 3, just some magnificent stuff. So before we finish this video, here's a quick recap of this ranking. Number 10 is Midnight, number 9 is Tooth and Claw, number 8 is Gridlock, number 7 is The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, number 6 is Human Nature and the Family of Blood, number 5 is Turn Left, number 4 is The Girl in the Fireplace, number 3 is The Waters of Mars, number 2 is Science of the Library, and number 1 is, of course, Blink. So that's it from my top 10 10th Doctor stories, and that's more or less it from the 10th Doctor's era now. But before we jump into the 11th Doctor's era, we've still got to do the ranking of my top 10 episodes of the mid to late 2000s, as we have now come to the end of the 2000s decade with the End of Time Part 1 in 2009, and we started the 2010s with the End of Time Part 2. And that story will be counted like across both decades, like the Horns of Nimon was in the 1970s and 80s. Although, spoiler alert, neither the Horns of Nimon nor the End of Time appear on either of their rankings that they'd be counted on, though they'd still be accepted if on both rankings if they were. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time for my top 10 stories of the mid to late 2000s. And then we'll be on to Series 5 with the 11th hour. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel.